Welcome to the Boss Mode Podcast, where we discuss AI and the future of work. Hello and welcome to the Boss Mode Podcast. Today I am joined by the fantastic Daria Kulachek, who is the creator of the Unsolicited Pitch Deck newsletter that is really on fire right now among the early stage startup community and investors who are interested in it. Daria also runs one of the hottest calendars for events related to tech in the Los Angeles area. I'm very happy to sit down together with you, Daria, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, David. It's a great pleasure.
Daria, I'm curious to learn about what inspired you to start this newsletter, and what were the very early days like, and the work that went into the first newsletter that went out there before you hit the send button.
Well, it actually started quite organic as I was going to a lot of networking events in LA. I kind of realized that I'm gathering events from all sorts of different platforms, from Eventbrite, from Luma, and early days of Partiful. Then there were events also on meetup.com. I don't know if you're familiar. So like there was like all sorts of sources, and there was no like directory that was compiling them all in one go. And if you would try to Google it, it wouldn't work in the same way. So as I was going myself and I was trying to organize, my networking efforts, I just started compiling it into a newsletter. And that was basically the whole idea. Yeah.
So it became like a single source of truth that consolidated all of the events, all of the going-ons in the LA tech industry, making it searchable and making it convenient for VCs, angel investors, and founders alike.
And also it was coming out on Sunday night. So it was kind of a way to prepare your week, just so you know, hey, what's happening? I know that, LA is big and you have to drive a lot. So you kind of have to know where things are happening to make sure that you can make to each location on time. In my opinion, or possibly in my personal observation too, what is happening is that after COVID, or during COVID rather, the in real life interaction kind of died out and we all like migrated to Zoom. And that boosted the online connection, and sort of a lot of people realized that they can be working remotely. But after this lasted for a couple of years, people realized that, hey, I actually don't want to miss out on that human connection, and I miss that, and I want to have a chit chat by the cooler, and all the things that everybody was making fun of about working in the office, people are returning exactly for them to, let's say, a working space or something like that. And once you erase all the busy work, let's say with AI, and you don't have to spend hours composing emails and make sure they sound both polite but firm, using all the large language models that you do right now, you actually free quite a lot of time to dedicate it to meeting people in person. And once you can optimize and find the right crowd, I think the in-person connection is the last missing puzzle piece.
Yeah. Although I will add that my emails to you, Daria, were not written by a large language model. I wrote those emails myself.
I appreciate it. No, but what I mean is that, like, I think if even though, like, let's say that some people use AI for different sorts of use cases, I think it alleviates the burden of a lot of busy work. I don't know, for me personally, it does. And a lot of like time spending Google search and research. For example, right now in newsletter are incorporated different also news and tech tea, I call it. So kind of like a gossip and latest, most like interesting or spicy takes. So it takes a while to kind of compile all the sources, but using AI, it's going faster for sure. Obviously, I have to verify that is not lying to me or is not making up a story that doesn't exist. But it does do a great job compiling all the sources and all the articles written on a certain topic, and it becomes quite faster, which is something that would have taken me a lot longer.
Yeah, and heck, even checking hallucinations is something that can be, to a certain extent, automated with AI. You can have like adversarial prompting, where you take the output of the original response, paste it into a fresh chat, maybe with something that is exceptionally good at getting kind of the latest information. Grok, having access to all of Twitter, all of X.
Mhm.
Um, Using that for clearly cited fact checking or anti hallucination checking, I found to be quite helpful. And so I would often take my output from Claude, the AI for thinkers and doers, and today I'm using Gemini more often.
Mhm.
But take that output and just paste it into Grok and say, hey, fact check this. Make sure that there are no hallucinations, and give me citations for everything. And also check the latest information on X to see if there are any current opinions related to all of the following, any of the following, and boom, hit the send button, and it comes back to me with something quite helpful generally, and very often it will catch the hallucinations.
Definitely. I also like to go to Reddit to see what are the people thinking of a said piece of news, or anything's happening. Let's say the recent news about mergers of or other acquisition of Warner Brothers by Netflix, which hasn't happened yet. But there was a lot of friction around it because they've announced it as a done deal. It actually hasn't been done yet. And I've seen posts on LinkedIn, on X, on Facebook, God knows everywhere, kind of confirming that it has happened, but it actually hasn't happened yet. So, like,
Yeah.
you do have to verify a lot of things. And if you're not attentive enough, like, this can be quite deceiving. So we're surrounded by a lot of information, but a lot of it is also deceptive.
Yeah, I think that email from Netflix, especially considering the audience that it was sent to, it was sent to their subscribers,
Hmm.
the majority of whom are not sophisticated actors when it comes to understanding all of the steps for approval involved in a transaction, such as Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. Um, I think that the level of deception is disappointing, um, because you might say, hey, it was factually, maybe it's factually correct, technically correct. But when you take into consideration the sophistication of the audience in that domain, I think it's pretty clearly, eh, at minimum, intellectually dishonest and deliberately misleading. But it's also just, I personally, as a consumer, would like to see that deal go through because there are just too many of these streaming services that are stacking on these subscriptions one after another, and the prices keep ramping up. I think that a degree of consolidation could help with um, creating efficiencies that will make it better for the consumer. But if you take that too far, where maybe Netflix becomes the only one left standing, then that's just anti-competitive. But I don't think that we're anywhere near a situation where it becomes anti-competitive.
Um, I guess I agree, but to a certain degree, it also seems to me that Netflix somewhat lost the plot. They used to be an innovative startup that was really um mobile and like reactive to its audience. And Netflix, like, getting into that league and acquiring Warner Brothers, and then kind of putting in one line classics like Casablanca and comparing it to forgive me, Netflix, but to their some of their shows are pretty generic. They're like almost Hallmark movie level, on the level of sophistication. It is like you said, it's intellectually dishonest, and it's deliberate as well. So I don't know if I can cite Harvey Dent from Batman saying that you live long enough to become a villain yourself. So I hope that that doesn't happen to Netflix as a once a really prominent startup and a unicorn. But we will see. We'll see.
Yeah, you've described. I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the assessment of the kind of content that Netflix is known for churning out to great commercial success. Um, Hallmark or just it's it's as though the content was created by algorithms, and maybe this is foreboding. This is we're already seeing ByteDance, and I imagine Meta will go down the same path, um, preparing to replace a lot of what creators are doing today on social media with AI generated content. I think that the same has already been happening very manually
Hmm.
in uh, in movies and episodic series on Netflix, because the executives making the decisions, I think, are heavily biased towards producing content that they expect will become a commercial hit more than anything else, above and beyond the storytelling. And as a company, in if we're thinking on the timeline of decades, that probably makes sense. But if we think on a timeline beyond decades, or beyond a decade, I think that we dilute the quality of the storytelling so much that at some point, I believe Netflix will get punished for what they've done in trusting the algorithm too much when it comes to deciding which stories to put forward.
Definitely, definitely. I believe they're making the really safe bets with their recent content, especially influenced by what's trending on TikTok. It's I don't know if you're familiar with the BookTok phenomenon. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
you can make or break a book with BookTok.
yeah, they and indeed they do, and that's become kind of like a pipeline of a book goes viral on BookTok. They buy the rights, they make a movie out of it, and it's a movie done within 6, 8 months, 12 months maximum, just to rile that wave of interest because that attention span is, is really short. So you have to go really fast to produce that movie, and you don't have the time for the quality, for the effects, for go somewhat deeper as movies usually require, or let's say the movies that withstand the test of time. So I believe that is kind of like fast-paced content production based on the what's currently trending on TikTok, the shortest attention span platform currently on the market, is ripping us off of the creativity and of the risky bets on actually creative content.
So I'm going to start with where I'm eventually going with what I'm about to describe. Um, I believe that where we will eventually land is highly personalized content that starts from here,
Hmm.
for me, where I set forward here from the heart, from the mind, from myself, somewhere inside of me. I'm thinking of a story that I want to hear, a story that I want to just hit me, to give me the feels, to give me something, um, and then I breathe that into life by describing it to AI. I believe that today we're actually, before I talk about what I believe, today we're seeing a tremendous amount of, in particular in LA, where you are right now, we're seeing a lot of pushback against the use of generative AI in the creative industry, in filmmaking in particular. So the AI actors, or the use of AI to fill in kind of missing scenes, instead of doing a very expensive reshoot, and understandably, because we're seeing lives affected. Like that's the bread and butter. Not only does that affect the income of the actors, it affects the income of the stuntman. It affects the income of the cameraman, the gaffer. It affects the income, the livelihood of the caterer, the realtor. All of this, like there's
Hmm.
in Los Angeles in particular,
Yeah.
there's a massive ripple effect when we transition from fully human production to AI production. And so understandably, the LA region, I imagine, is generally by default opposed to the use of AI in creative production. But I believe that where we are ultimately headed is, it is inevitable that AI will be used for creative production, and that will bring down the cost so dramatically that the cost will effectively be zero. And when that happens, anybody with creative vision, somebody who holds a vision in his mind. And that's actually quite rare for someone to hold a vision.
Mhm.
And so I do believe that there's a very important human element to this. Anybody who holds a creative vision in their mind or somewhere in their soul, they express it with AI and then they'll have this story. And that individual need not have, and because they're not investing $100 million in the production of this thing, they don't need to have commercial interest investors kind of diluting the soul of this production, right? Because I think that investors often do step in to a creative production and just mess it up with all their demands. Like, I want you to use this talent. I want you to tweak this story so that it's brand safe. It's got to be inclusive. It's got like they mess up a lot of things. And because we have fewer kind of hands in the pot, that people who aren't truly emotionally and whose souls aren't invested in the creation of this thing, we have fewer of these people or none of these people there to mess it up. I think that we'll get purer creative productions, and the individual breathing this thing into existence doesn't have to be thinking about return on investment. They're just thinking, I want this story to exist. I imagine that if we go back to Michelangelo, uh, sure, there would have been by necessity some commercial aspects to what he did, like he needed to put food on the table, right? But at some point, at some level, Michelangelo was creating art because it was inside of him and it needed to be expressed.
Mhm.
And I think that AI just might bring us back to that point where people are creating for a very human reason. People are creating to express themselves. And I think that that will be possible when the cost of creation comes down and people are kind of freed from the influence of too many non-committed uh, hands in the pot.
I think I agree with you, and I think we already see that happening. Because if you go on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, right, anything that is video based, you see a lot of creators creating like they don't have to be like long form movies, but they're quite original and you can see anything of anything. And if you remember Vine, that was like the pre TikTok that was too early for the market. Like there was this video of this guy who was puking lemons, right? So who in their right mind would want to watch a guy puking lemons for like at random occasions of the day? But he got super viral. Like it got really, really viral, and people like were watching them. So I think this kind of like we're gonna crave, and we already do crave this kind of creativity that is just emerging from people, and it's gonna resonate with some. And I think once the distribution channels are not so heavily gatekept by studios, by cinematic productions, and by necessity of huge investment into marketing and whatnot, we're gonna see this kind of a free flow of content that's going to be accessible. And like you said, that is the cost of production is going to be really low as AI becomes more user native and less technical to use as a creative tool. So I do look forward actually to when movies can be produced by anyone who has a vision or an idea. And obviously the interest, right? The market will decide which ones of them are worth the attention and they're gonna go more popular. Some of them are just gonna be really niche and that's fine. But I'm really curious about that kind of future.
Yeah, yeah. I think the economic pressure for everything to become a viral hit is massive when we're talking about these $100 million investments or $50 million or even $10 million investments in a production. Then of course we have to sacrifice creative vision for commercial needs because the money came from somewhere,
Hmm.
um, and and that somewhere is going to want a return on its investment. Um, and I think that that's already played out. Set Netflix aside. that already played out at Warner Brothers even. That already played out at HBO, at AMC. That played out at heck A24. At every single studio that is producing content, the need to drive return on investment necessarily led to a lot of investor involvement in what can and cannot be said, in what way, by whom. And while I think that making money is good, absolutely is good, I do think that it would be tremendously empowering for us at the level of all of human society if creators could just create for the sake of expressing themselves. And I see AI doing that. I think that what Netflix is doing today to great effect, it can, focusing on what will drive viewing hours more than anything else, is the same thing that Warner Brothers did. So they're just doing it better, in my view.
Well, I think eventually a platform that is going to be something like Spotify, but for video content, is going to emerge, right? YouTube is already there. But I'm talking more about like movies that are subscription based because I don't know what percentage of YouTube subscribers are actually premium subscribers, but on Spotify, that's the vast majority. Um, and people are going to want to consume the content directly from creators and platform getting cut, and that's a more fair market, like what happened with the same that happens with musicians right now. So that's going to be an interesting
Although a lot of musicians
complaint.
do have some
Yeah.
concerns about the amount of revenue share they generate, but I think that while I can be empathetic to that, I do think that Spotify has just given a tremendous platform to artists in terms of the reach. It's democratized access to music, to finding your music
Yeah.
as a listener, um, which was frankly hard for a lot of folks because you had to go in and buy the music. You had to sit there listening to the radio. Who has the time to be listening all the time to find that one song that's right for me, that gives me the feels, that moves me? I think Spotify has probably been single-handedly responsible for, um, probably more so than even Napster, um, single-handedly responsible for helping more people find the song that moves them than any other music industry entity.
100%. And I can vouch for myself, right? Because I know that Spotify recommends me. So I can curate my algorithm on Spotify if I want to have more new songs of said genre or like specific type of music. I can just listen more of it, and then it offers me new artists like every week and new songs and whatnot. So that's great. Like I'm not gonna go on Google and like, hey, more artists of that genre. It's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of expanding, zooming out from the music and film industry, um, and this applies equally to music and film, by the way. Founders or creators, the act of creating something, in business or in music or in whatever capacity today can be done with far fewer people due to the rise of AI. How have you seen, as the person behind the Unsolicited Pitch Deck newsletter, how have you seen team sizes change through the use of AI? Are they getting smaller? Are people with smaller teams doing more?
Definitely, and I've definitely seen a rise of a solo career too. Um, because as you understand yourself, there's a lot of tools that are substituting the kind of basic competence in a set topic. For example, if you are a developer and you have an idea and you can code and everything, and then you need to build, let's say, a design or a brand and a logo, now you can go on Canva, or you can use partially Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini, and then kind of come up with a logo and put this all design back on Figma and play with it, and they're gonna suggest you colors and tweaks that you can make. So it is kind of self-taught to a great degree, and I think a lot of founders that I see, they're solo founders, which is great. I think it's, in my opinion, the faster you can validate your idea and actually see some response, and that if somebody wants it to come to fruition, the better, because the less time you are spending or wasting on trying to create something that nobody wants, if your goal is a commercial success, of course. If it's just the pure act of creation, then even better. You don't need anybody. You don't need money, except for like possibly some subscription payments for pro versions of for these platforms, which can come up to maximum $50 a month, let's say, and you're basically fine. So before, you'd have to hire people and invest money just into validating or seeing something remotely what you envision. These days, you can do it within hours.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, absolutely. And that used to take weeks or months,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Even if you have the skill set
Hmm.
innately, just yourself as an individual, even if you have like a full stack technical slash marketing slash, like if you have everything,
Hmm.
it would still take you weeks to months a year ago to bring that into fruition, to make it something you can touch and feel. It's software, right? So you
Yeah.
can't actually touch it, but um, to breathe it into existence, it took weeks or months at minimum. And today that takes hours or days, and that's highly consequential. I'll share my screen here
Hmm.
uh, for just a moment. The Vanka logo. So I'm co-founder of Vanka AI, and our thesis is just what you described, right? The idea that an individual can take action at tremendous distance by through the use of AI to take their idea and turn it into a tangible prototype, and then and then raise money or get your first customers, or uh, then operate your business through the use of AI as well. This logo here was
Hmm.
designed using AI. It was
Really?
designed using Vanka. So it's a little bit like the dragon eating its own tail, except in a much more maybe it's like the dragon creating its own tail. We 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 used Vanka, our ontology, and the personas that we created to generate this logo. And there are some slight imperfections, right? Like the slight curve in the top left line
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
That's something that we deliberately decided to leave in there because I think that these imperfections are actually highly meaningful. And I almost think of it as like a distorted vortex, kind of taking reality into account. At any rate, it got me when you mentioned that, yeah, a technical founder, an engineer, can go ahead and even produce their logo themselves
Hmm.
inside of Nano Banana.
Yeah.
And that was done using GPT Image One, or the older ChatGPT image generation model.
And that's really cool. And it can go from like professional use to like really basic use and within the household. I don't know. My dad has always wanted our family to have an emblem. Okay. He's not a painter, not a designer, but now he can just go into whatever AI that is on the market and create it. And he's playing with it. He's organizing the shed or rebuilding the pool, and all those ideas, he can test them out and visualize them without rendering, and it comes together way faster, and it shortens the time that is needed to reiterate and validate and test your hypothesis, whether it's a business one or it's a life related one.
Yeah, yeah. Everything that you've just described is echoed by Christine Tsai, who's the head of 500 Global, way back in the day, 500 startups. Christine, I think she's the general partner there, head of the fund. Um, she posted a few videos now on Instagram through the 500 Global account. You should probably follow at 500 Global on Instagram. in addition to Y Combinator and Techstars. I think they put out a lot of very good, useful content for startup founders. It pairs very well with the Unsolicited Deck Peak newsletter. Um, Christine talks at length about how startups no longer need massive funding rounds in order to make progress. In fact, startups can start with zero funding. It's the tools are available to get your initial prototype stood up. And I would say, and this is why why we founded Vanka. Vanka AI was founded with the premise that uh, the entire system of labor is being reorganized today.
Hmm.
Um, a founder or a CEO or a manager doesn't actually want to hire people if they're able to do the job themselves. Like if I had 5 extra hands, uh, and I'm making burgers, I would rather make the burgers with just keep adding hands to my body and keep making more burgers
Hmm.
as one person, uh, and make a lot more money. Keep the margin, right? If I can
100%.
find a way to scale myself, how many times has a very talented, smart, driven individual said, "Oh, I wish I had two more of me, 5 more of me. Oh, if only I could make like 10 more copies of myself, or one more."
At least one, yeah. And it's coming to the fruition, and I think we're gonna eventually reach the level of agentic AI that allows you to kind of compile your skill set plus an additional expertise that you yourself do not possess, and
Yes.
implement it in that person or in that like artificial person that is gonna be your stunt double, but better, faster, and stronger. And then you just can be a team together. But in a way, I think though that one of the reasons why people still strive to human connection is even though they have that kind of ability to somewhat replicate themselves and find this expertise in a computer, they still want to have some real feedback. And they want somebody who's not an overpraising ChatGPT or a more reasonable Claude to tell them, hey, I actually like what you're doing. And they know that they're a real person. They're not like biased by a program. They're just either like it or they don't. So that's something that I think people still strive for.
One of the hidden superpowers is that OpenAI, through the use of ChatGPT and their massive consumer install base, I think is getting an understanding of the consumer's wants, desires, fears, aspirations, and needs. Consequently, ChatGPT, at some point soon, I expect, will be able to put forward an agent for every individual consumer user of AI. And that agent can give the market feedback to businesses that are trying to sell to me.
Hmm.
So rather than me making the assessment every single time, ChatGPT, which has phenomenal context about me, will be able to give automated, autonomous feedback to businesses that are trying to sell to me. I don't have to waste my time talking to them. It filters out the garbage. It prioritizes the ones that it thinks deserve my attention. At some point, it will just go off and make the purchases for me. But I believe a very near-term intermediary step will be, instead of having Amazon curate
Hmm.
the items that I'm supposed to see and it expects me to buy, we'll have ChatGPT do that. And we've seen the beginnings of that. What is it? Perplexity. Perplexity AI was sued by Amazon for putting out the agentic browser.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've read about it actually. And
Why would Amazon sue tiny little Perplexity and suffer the reputation damage of Goliath attacking David?
well, in my opinion, because they want to do the same, right? And they want to make sure that they have the capacity and they occupy that market gap because they know that this is the future. And I think for Amazon, it's really important to own the niche that they virtually created themselves. And they're gonna end up either buying Perplexity or building a Perplexity. They already have their own AI, I believe that they're working on and investing gazillions of dollars into.
Yeah. Amazon, I'm sure, has for a long time been using machine learning and AI in the use of for the purposes of putting recommendations forward and deciding the sequence and putting forward more recently, very likely automated creative or creative that was produced by the brands or their agencies through the use of generative AI. But I expect that Amazon does not want Perplexity. They absolutely do not want Perplexity to uh, be an agent for the consumer
Hmm.
because the consumer's interest is to get the best deal possible. So Perplexity sure is going to look at, let's say I'm looking for uh, a glass cleaning microfiber cloth, right? Um, on 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 Amazon. Um, Amazon will recommend what it wants, what's in Amazon's best interest to recommend to me. Part of that is my likelihood to buy, right? So it does take my preferences, product preferences, my budget, things like that into consideration. What is the likelihood of me converting on purchasing this lens cleaning microfiber cloth um, for $3 versus another one for $5? Maybe probability goes up at the $5 mark. Maybe it goes up at the three. But for each consumer, Amazon
Hmm.
understands that very, very well. Now, Amazon will, yeah, take that into consideration, but it will also take into consideration what is Amazon's margin? How much money does Amazon make on this lens cleaner versus the other one? And of course, it's going to promote the one that it makes more money on as long as the conversion rate isn't so much lower that Amazon ends up ultimately on a net basis making less money. Uh, so Amazon is interested in its own money making ability. The interesting thing about Perplexity is in its current form and in its, I expect it's the way that they're thinking of agentic commerce in AI is I believe Perplexity wants to be the representative for the consumer. More generally speaking, so finding not just the best deal for the best lens cleaning cloth on Amazon, but across the entire internet, finding me the lowest priced lens cleaning cloth uh, for the best performance that meets my preferences as a consumer. And very likely that will not be on Amazon. And I think
I,
this is why Amazon is suing Perplexity.
I agree. I agree. But I think the problem here is also lies in the trust. So me as a consumer, I don't know what would it take for me to trust that agentic AI is presenting my interest, because they have investors, they have founders, and they're a pro-profit company. So how they're making their money, even if I'm paying my subscription fee, I just don't think I believe that that is enough for me to place full trust into them making financial decisions for me. And I think
That's a
that's
really good point. And where I want to I make a very important distinction. If you're not paying, you are the product.
100%.
Uh, and in the case of Perplexity, I think that the Comet browser costs what was available at least when I tested it. It was available for subscribers at that $100 per month tier. So very clearly, they're making. Well, then again, they're very much a wrapper to the other foundation to the foundational models. So they may not be making money on that, but let's assume they're able to make money at $100 per user, which I expect they would um, per month, really, which I think is probably higher than the actual average revenue per account on a monthly basis that Amazon would take from its users. I expect that they would be able to make some money on that, even though they're generally a wrapper to the foundational models. Um, and this is why I think that it becomes in their best interest when Perplexity's customer is clearly me, the consumer. Perplexity, if they get caught, uh,
Hmm.
kind of not like fundamentally, deliberately, by design, not representing my interests, they lose me as a customer. And that's highly consequential to them. So then that kind of arrangement breeds trust, I believe. Um, so I think that that's healthy. And I would say that $100 a month for kind of your middle of market and up, as a consumer on Amazon, I expect that $100 per month might actually work out to being a savings, um, over the course of a year on all the things that people buy.
Like, I see your point, but I think you're also speaking from the position of a person who is into tech. I know that my mom would never pay $100 for a browser.
Yeah,
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 she's not paying for an antivirus that is asking her $3 a year. So
yep,
she would never. She would never. And also, we're talking about the consumers that are, let's say, okay, maybe some consumers in San Francisco, LA, New York, Austin, Seattle would pay, but the rest of the country, no. For a lot of
yeah.
people, that's a huge expense. So I don't see it as a sustainable, or at least as a very scalable model.
Yeah, I would actually tend to strongly agree with you, um, for a few reasons. One simple reason, I also think that for myself, $100 a month just felt frivolous, especially given the state of the functionality of the
Hmm.
Perplexity Comet browser. It just wasn't there,
Hmm.
and so I tested it. I used it for a month or two maybe, to really kick the tires, and then I hit the unsubscribe
Yeah.
button.
Yeah.
I recently hit the unsubscribe button on ChatGPT as well.
Hmm.
I was subscribed at the $200 a month tier. I'd previously tested at the $20 a month tier, but for a few reasons, I needed the $200 tier. But Gemini recently has just blown them out of the water, in terms of performance and cost as well. So I've jumped ship and I'm using Gemini now. So I do think that, um, kind of, at a very simple and selfish level, I didn't see the value in Perplexity on a running basis. Um, but stepping back from me and looking broader, I love that you brought up, your mother, or like somebody in Poughkeepsie, New York, or somebody in Idaho Falls. Uh, these consumers, generally speaking, will not sign up for $100 a month, $200 a month, for a lot of these services. Average income is just a lot lower. Um, Granted, cost of living is also substantially lower in these places, but nonetheless, I just don't see them subscribing at $100 a month for a Perplexity Comet browser. Um, it one isn't there yet in terms of competence,
Hmm.
and two, it's just expensive.
So coming to the expensive part, what do you think happens once AI takes all of our jobs and we're sitting here being idle? Because this is a big topic that is circulating in tech, especially following tech events, I would say, especially following the massive layoffs that are happening in tech after years and years of constant hiring and wonderful salaries. It used to be one of the most stable careers. It used to be one of the drivers for immigration, especially from the country where I'm from Ukraine, from the Eastern European region, where this used to be one of those aspirational careers. And um, to bring some lore from that region, it used to be really aspirational to be a wife of an IT guy, because that means very stable, very high salary, and just in general an aspirational lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you mentioned immigration, which is something that I've put a substantial amount of thought towards, for a few reasons. I'm Canadian, and so to be in the U.S., it became very expensive. Like legal fees associated with filing papers and all that, like the costs have just jumped. Um, it's expensive and a lot more arduous. But I would say that the U.S. is still looking for, uh, productive, immediately impactfully productive, uh, additions to the workforce, and I think that that's, um, very clearly additive to the U.S. economy. And the pathways are still there. They're just a little bit more expensive, and unless you're on an H-1B, in which case it's a lot more expensive. Um, so I think that, that being said, a lot of countries, not just the US, I expect will be moving to reduce the inflow of immigrants. And if we think about why countries are bringing immigrants in, there are the compassionate humanitarian reasons for it, right? But even those are somewhat tied to national defense. There are complex reasons why governments put money into humanitarian efforts. Um, and of course, there's the human dimension to it, and that matters, absolutely. But there are also other reasons. And I think that we're seeing even that start to fade into the background. I think that the biggest reason for driving immigration, legal or illegal immigration into a country, uh, is labor. And it is highly consequential that labor is being automated. It is highly consequential to immigration policy that labor is being automated. Because when jobs are being automated, we no longer have trouble hiring people for those jobs, which reduces the need, that it reduces the instances of there being a need to hire someone that remains unmet because people don't want those jobs, simply because those jobs no longer exist in the first place. So I think that we're seeing, heck, even in New York, I saw cashiers from Manila on computer monitors,
Yeah,
right? And instead of paying your New York City minimum wage or whatever, they've really pushed up the minimum wage now, right? Let's actually, I don't know what the minimum wage is in New York City, but let's see, New York City,
so like
New York State
$17.
minimum wage, 1650 it says.
Oh, yeah, that's
Uh,
correct.
yeah. Future rate scheduled to rise to $17 an hour in just a couple of weeks on January 1st, 2026. Now, this is an AI response from Google, so take that with a grain of salt. Um, so rather than paying $17 an hour, now you've got a convenience store or a bodega that can pay $3 an hour to somebody in Manila, $5 an hour to somebody in Manila, plus whatever markup this company that's facilitating this charges, right? So it's still a massive savings over the $17 an hour, and you get the correctness of a human being there. So now there's less of a need to get legal or illegal laborers working the cash register in a bodega.
I actually agree with you, and I don't know if it's a controversial take or no, but my firm belief is that technocrats coming closer to the government in the recent cycle has definitely influenced that. And I think one of the biggest reasons for the knockdown and pressure on immigration in the US right now is the reason that they understand that in the following 10 years, the need for those basic entry level jobs is going to just plummet. And
Yeah.
who is going to sustain all these people? It has to be the taxpayers. So uh, we can only um, we can only pay so much and sustain that big of a population in this country.
Yep. Yep. And I think that there's also a challenge with if somebody who is new to a country is remains hopeful, sees a path to building a quality life, right? Then that hope kind of governs. Becomes the hope becomes guardrails around behavior. The hope becomes guardrails that uh, become an intrinsic motivator to behave in a way that is rightmost and good for uh, the people around me. Um, but if we have immigrants who come to a country, they land, they work really hard, they try to do it the honest way, they are good people, even like deeply good people. If they get hit by wall after wall after wall of failure and hopelessness because of a lack of jobs available to them, these are people who do not have an anchor in the country in a lot of cases, less of an anchor. And the fewer anchors you have with an absence of hope leads to a disconnect from behaving in a way that keeps society functioning. It drives hopelessness. It drives anger. It drives frustration and people lashing out. Um, and I guess at an individual level, we could be compassionate to them, saying, "Hey, you know what? He's had a really hard time." But if we multiply this by millions or even hundreds of thousands, it becomes dangerous. And this is why I think that while we sort out this change in uh, the the labor market, um, you mentioned how what happens when uh, people no longer have jobs.
Mhm.
While we sort out that transition, I think it is right most to restrict immigration as much as possible for all countries, right? And what that does is a couple of things. It also keeps the best and the brightest, the most highly motivated inside of their home countries to invest in making their countries stronger and better. And these are people who are, when I think about the people who have, over the course of the past few decades, made that very difficult decision to uproot their lives and travel across the ocean. And like, heck, for me, it was just like, walking across the border or flying across the border from Canada. That stuff's easy, right? But if we're talking about somebody flying in from Syria or from Japan or from Russia or from Ukraine or far away, right? We're talking about people who make that decision to come all the way here to the United States, to the land of opportunity, to the American dream. That's a very, very hard decision. So now we're self-selecting for people that have a tremendous amount of um, wherewithal, a lot of like the willingness to fight through hardship, the bravery, and that alone speaks volumes about these tremendously impressive human beings. Um, I, I I I think that these individuals, given the tools of AI, because remember, the United States had so many infrastructure advantages over a lot of other countries. And so, in order to build something, it was probably easiest. Like, if we think about just the amount of red tape in a lot of countries, it might actually be, if you think about it like tremendously logically, it might have been easier for them to make that very difficult and bold and brave journey to the United States without a support network and start their business than it was to start a business back home, because a lot of the resources and infrastructure and know-how just wasn't available around them in those countries. But today it's there. Like, Google Cloud is available globally. Well, there are exceptions. I don't think Google Cloud. Correct me if I'm wrong, Googlers, but I don't think Google Cloud's available in North Korea, for example.
Yeah, what you
So,
say.
like, outliers aside, I think that today Google Cloud's available globally. Starlink is available in most countries. I think that ChatGPT is available in most countries. Like, the sum of human knowledge is available to you wherever you are today. So I think it's just easier for people to still find a path to thriving in their home country.
I agree. And I think also, as we come into this highly globalist society, one of the biggest bottlenecks is, of course, bureaucracy. I've been living in Europe for quite a while, so I know everything about it. Of how many papers and visits to city hall or whatnot, office of something it takes to get something going, and months of wait. Um, but another one is access to capital. And I think, as investors here are laser focused on AI and investing heavily in AI, another part of US investors are actually focused on hardware, or they're focused on space tech. And they are looking for companies all over. I've come across scouts who are now have hiring VC scouts in Nigeria, in Morocco, in Singapore, in Malaysia. Um, I, I've as I've been growing, my newsletter has been growing. I've come across investor organizations who are more interested in European startups because those are overlooked, or they've looking at Latin America, because they're in the same time zone, is very easy to work. The labor is significantly cheaper, but they have a massive amount of people who are interested in services. They have their own, let's say, Spanish-speaking Netflix, and they have their own networks of similar companies that have like a huge amount of space in front of them for growth, an amazing market ahead. So I I think it's partially gonna also help to facilitate those connections, which is one of the goals, for me personally, is to facilitate the interconnection of tech hubs, not only within the US, but also outside of the US, both for startups to have access to capital in the US, but also from startups in the US to have access to other markets too.
You raise a really important point, and I've got two other reasons why the access to capital issue is less of an issue today. Um, but I want to double down on what you were describing. Today, we have very smart investors who are. We also have a lot of not very smart investors. We'll bookmark that one for a future episode, and that could be a whole series. But we have smarter investors who see that a lot of founders are in remote countries are given, and not remote, maybe that's a little too extreme, but in countries around the world, in major urban centers around the world, these founders have access to many of the same advantages, not all of the same advantages as American founders, but have access to many of the same advantages of American founders. Google Cloud is everywhere, and they're funding companies everywhere with credits, right? I think that, and ChatGPT is available everywhere, and Claude is available everywhere. So the ability of a founder in Seoul, Korea, is in many ways on par with the American founder experience. And then you think about the delta, this gap here, right?
Hmm.
The Seoul-based founders, sure, they will have some disadvantages relative to the American founders, right? But then they'll also have other advantages that are just completely unknown to the American founder. Separate infrastructure advantages that are in Korea versus here. Same thing applies to Tokyo. Same thing applies to Paris. Maybe less so Paris because of the extremes in red tape. But yeah, I think my point generally stands. Investors are seeing there's this new data point for investors that indicates that a founder outside of the U.S. Does have many of the same advantages as an American founder, and then paired with the Unsolicited Deck Peak newsletter, I think that founders globally will have access to the U.S. style experience in many ways that were not afforded to them previously. I also think that two other things come to mind. As we discussed earlier, the need for capital has decreased. So a founder in Berlin, whereas before, if they needed $1 million for their pre-seed round, today maybe that entire pre-seed round might be done at $100,000, right?
Hmm.
Maybe their first check, if they needed a first check of $100,000, today a first check of $10,000 is something to be really excited about and empowered by, because you can make $10,000 go just as far as that $100,000 check used to be. And that takes me to my third point, the Vanka Autonomous Pre-Seed Fund. Vanka has an autonomous pre-seed fund where the amounts are small. Yeah. It's $10,000 cash and then $10,000 in credits inside of Vanka. But pair that with your Google Cloud credits, tiered based upon the stage your company is in. Pair that with your AWS credits. Pair that with the access to the network they get through the Unsolicited Deck Peak newsletter. Pair that with your events. Pair that with ChatGPT, and all of a sudden, this founder with a $10,000 check can compete head-to-head, toe-to-toe with that same founder just a year ago who had $100,000. So I think that for a lot of reasons, access to capital has become less of a reason. And maybe I'll close by going into an article that I came across today.
Oh.
I'll share my it's a blog post that I found on X, and I'm increasingly finding the X algorithm is beginning to be more and more useful to me. After just putting a little bit of effort into curating, because you could get a lot of junk, just like, and maybe less so than Reddit. I think Reddit is known to be a cesspool in a lot of ways. X, and frankly any social media platform, because of the way recommendations work, can become a cesspool. But I found X to be, as of late, being incredibly useful. It surfaced this article, "The Bubble is Labor." You asked the question, what do we do when um, the jobs aren't there anymore? And I think it's important to consider, why are we thinking that jobs might be there anymore? And Daniel Miesler, who I'm looking forward to reaching out to, uh, highlights that companies only hire people because they can't do all the work themselves without those people, right? So if every founder had 10,000 hands and brains they could assign to different tasks, there would be a minuscule fraction of the jobs we have today. He breaks it down very, very logically. Um, he sees that uh, labor is a side effect, and he talks at length about why it's important to recognize and acknowledge that today one might argue it's the government's job, but I don't think it is. It really is nobody's job to create jobs. Um, there are some people with like fictional jobs at the Canadian Trade. So what is it? Team Canada, and in Korea it's the Korean Overseas Trade something, Kotra. I think Japan has. Every country has their own government agency that goes out there and tries to bring in money from abroad to create jobs domestically. But really, it's nobody's real job to create jobs. And I think that when we see AI performing well enough to replace jobs, or have fewer people doing the work, we will. Um, and that's happened in 2025. I think it was something like 1.2 million jobs were lost in 2025, and I expect that 2026 will be the year that it could go as much as 10x. I was previously projecting that over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, we would see 10 million jobs lost. But it could all very well play out in 2026. And so what then do we do? I believe that, going back to what we described, here we are back live again. I believe that we are going to be in a situation where people will create art, people will create life, people will create businesses. They'll create for the sake of creating, because they want to express themselves. And in doing so, I think that people will eventually find that by serving themselves as their own customer through this act of creation, they'll start to find very authentic audiences that care about what they're creating. And that connection of audiences beginning to care about what I'm creating turns into businesses. Very naturally, even art can become
Mhm.
a stream of income, without this overly kind of just performative nature of social media today. I think that authentic creation, for me, will lead to authentically interested customers, where I don't need ads, bottom of funnel ads driving people in. Um, I think that people will have multiple streams of income, and they'll have equity instead of salary. And I would even argue that, as of late, salaries, jobs, they're a form of slavery. In ancient Egypt, people building the pyramids were paid in beer, bread and beer, just enough to sustain themselves. Today, people in America, a lot of people, even with a six-figure income, a lot of people certainly with incomes lower than that, are having trouble simply making ends meet, let alone getting ahead. And if it's just about barely achieving sustenance, or in many cases, not even being able to sustain yourself, then is it truly voluntary labor? Is it truly a job? It's a kind of prison.
I agree with you. But I think that somewhat of UBI or universal based income would have to jump into place. Um, because the adjustment, I think the notion of having a job and the whole almost dogma around it is so ingrained within humans that is really difficult for us to imagine what's it like when nobody works, right? Or very few people work in terms of like having a job and a salary. Um, I think COVID, funnily enough, kind of brought us closer to understanding what's it like to just have your time for yourself and let's say work online or work from home. And many people realize that they're not their dream reality. You know, a lot of families disappeared because they just did realize that they couldn't live together. So that's going to be, I think it's going to be a tough transition. Hopefully,
Yeah.
eventually we'll get into the almost utopian future that you're describing. But I think the transition is going to be rough for sure. For some, it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Certainly it will be a rough transition, and there's urgency here. And this rough transition that you describe is the burning motivation that I have uh, to create Vanka.
Hmm.
Um, I believe that, heck, I was just on the train yesterday, and I gently asked an individual to put headphones on instead of blaring his TV show to everybody on the train. And he became very animated and angry and frankly violent.
Hmm.
And I ended up leaving to back away from this confrontation because as a very good friend of mine, my co-founder mentioned to me, he's like, you can't educate the world one by one, everybody in the world one by one, right? I'm glad that I had walked away. Um, but people are angry, and I think that, and he talked a little bit about how he talked about work and things like that, and so he seemed very, very angry. I think that it's urgent that we address the issue of sustenance, being able to have a life of that has dignity, in terms of being able to pay for sustenance, your shelter, your food and your water, your education. This stuff should be something that is within the ability of every individual. Um, but it's more than that, because we also need a way to give people meaning. If we can't give these two things, the ability to sustain yourself and your family, as well as meaning to the young men and women out there, um, I worry that we will end up in a very dangerous situation. It's like a powder keg, right? And we're playing with fire all around us right now, and it's quite explosive. I worry. The only way to minimize the risk of things just exploding into something that's just a lot messier, a lot more violent than the current situation, is if we, yes, give people sustenance in a way that's predictable, the ability to have sustenance. And I think that maybe a type of UBI could be that, especially in the early years. Uh, maybe I can get behind that, but only if we address the other component. How do
Hmm.
we give people a life of meaning? Because simply putting food on the table is not enough. I believe that young men in particular need to have this sense of purpose, this sense of knowing that what I do, venturing out into this world, uh, and young men aside, just in general, people need meaning in their lives. The ability to think, hey, I am taking this action which involves some element of risk, and I am going to battle. I'm going to fight against the odds, and I'm going to create um, something of value that other people recognize and say, hey, good job. Or, hey, I really like that. Or, gee, Jill, that's a gorgeous painting. Gee, Mike, that's an amazing novel. Or that's a great short story. You should turn that into a novel. People want to feel that, right? Or even just the self-satisfaction of seeing the sketch that I made, thinking, that's actually pretty good. I mean, I wish I could do better. I did a better job here in this corner, or the nose isn't quite right, but it's pretty good, and I'm proud of myself, and I want to do better. This sense of meaning is necessary, and I believe that all forms of creation, art, business, certainly through Vanka, becomes more accessible to everybody. The ability to start your own business, create your own story, become the hero of your own story, is necessary that we invest heavily in as a society, and direct young people towards, in addition to something like a UBI.
I agree. And I also think that meaning can be found in different places. It can be a meaning through creation, but it can be a meaning through community or the village, as we used to call it. I recently read, and was it an article or like a blog post about a program that was either in Germany or in Belgium, where they paired uh, young people. They focused on women because I guess it was a little bit safer. So they were pairing young women who couldn't afford to rent out their whole apartment with older women who were retired and owned an apartment. And they made them roommates. And actually, that was a really successful program because a lot of these young women kind of moved out from their family. They moved to a bigger city, let's say to Berlin, for the argument's sake. They didn't have the family, they didn't have their grandma around or their mom. And the older women, they were missing the company and the kind of energy that a young person brings. And that was a really fruitful combination that kind of creating meaning, I think, for both parties. And, you know, the older person is able to provide some um I don't know, some advice about dating or how you should approach this or how was her experience in, I don't know, getting a job back in the day and how is it looking like right now? And then for the young person is able to introduce the older person to, hey, this is Claude and this is ChatGPT and that's how you can use it, how you can look up a recipe or how you can, I don't know, replant a flower and it's going to give you all the sort of steps and the necessary information that you want.
You raise a really important point, and I wholeheartedly am aligned with you. And I'll just add that I have a very expansive view, expansive definition of creativity, creation. I do believe fundamentally to be human is to create, but to create encompasses things like creating a relationship, creating a community, creating the evolution of a community, creating the continuity of a community. Even I believe that when I say the creation of life, I'm talking
Mhm.
specifically about reproduction, even having children, building families. This is all a part of creating, and I do deeply believe that the use of AI will free us up to have more time to create these very important human outcomes. For too long, I think we've been trending towards the dehumanization of our people, the dehumanization of too many, the majority of our society. And I believe this to be the reason why people are angry. And I see a simple but very hard to accomplish solution, and that is to one, free up, give people the resources, and the most important resource is time, right? Because too much of our time is spent on just surviving, right? So if we can
Mhm.
lower the bar of surviving, because surviving has become very expensive as of late, we can lower the bar, lower the cost of surviving, and make that less of a trek. Like, heck, it used to be that a lot of people had to go for a long walk, a long hike to gather water to bring back home every single day. There
It's
are
true.
still people who do, but very, very few. The amount of work that goes into just surviving needs to be brought down. And if we do that, then people have the single most precious resource to create that which expresses our humanity, that celebrates and advances our humanity, our own individual humanity and our collective. They receive time. They recapture their time. And these tools that are already, frankly, available to many, your Claude, your Claude Code, your ChatGPT, your Gemini, these tremendous tools with your Google Cloud and your AWS, and frankly, the rule of law, safe streets, good transportation systems, and very soon better transportation systems, because I'm looking forward to the day that I can just take a self-driving car to my destination instead of a train with angry youths. I think we'll be in a much better place at that point. But Daria, today was just a true pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you. You have very insightful views that are frankly helpful to a generation of generations of people who are faced with some very difficult challenges around reframing, overcoming the programming that they've had, the indoctrination they've had, to just expect companies and governments to take care of them with jobs. Your unsolicited deck peek in itself is an important way to encourage and facilitate and guide people towards positive, productive behaviors that lead to them expressing very important parts of themselves to solve real problems in this world. And I believe that you are going to impact thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives directly, enabling them and encouraging them to embrace entrepreneurship and building equity and potentially multiple income streams to replace the employment mindset that we've all been indoctrinated to expect.
Thank you so much, David, for your kind words. I really appreciate our conversation. I always love, I love your nuanced takes. I think is really important. I love the long form because, as we're consuming all this short form media, the nuance often gets lost. And I'm excited for where you're building, to be honest. I'm excited to see Vanka thrive because I believe that each single one of us has this one idea or tens of thousands of ideas that we don't have time to test. And I think Vanka facilitates that spark of creativity and is going to be really instrumental. I think it's something that a lot of young people, like young, I mean like 17, 18, the ones that are even getting into college. A lot of people who get into college don't know what they want to study, right? They don't know who they are. But I think it's one of those tools that's going to be really, really helpful to them to understand like what they want to pursue. And that's something that is super valuable.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to talking to members of your community who hop into Vanka. And frankly, I'm looking forward to seeing what you create in Vanka as well.
For sure. For sure.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye, folks.